starting with Mr. Cooper, followed by Mrs. Sahota, Madame Goudreau, et puis Madame Blaney. Comments through the chair, unless we can take turns speaking one after another. I would like us to maximize our time together, and I know we can do it. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister. It is well established that the Beijing regime interfered in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. We also know that the Beijing regime has operated at least 8 illegal police stations on Canadian soil to intimidate Chinese Canadian citizens, including through coerced repatriations. So, Minister, in the face of this blatant attack on our democracy, on our sovereignty, and the safety and security of Canadians, why is it that under your government's watch not a single Beijing diplomat has been expelled from Canada?
First, Madam Chair, as you heard me explain during my remarks, this government has been concrete and proactive in combating foreign interference. We put in place new authorities for our national security agencies, including CSIS. The RCMP have taken decisive action to shut down the so-called police stations that Mr. Cooper referred to, and we will continue to raise the bar. We're looking forward to receiving recommendations from David Johnston, and we will be full court press in fighting against this threat to our national security.
Minister, I asked you a very specific question. When the Minister of Foreign Affairs last appeared before this committee a month ago on the question that was put to her about expelling Beijing diplomats, she replied, quote, "Everything that is linked to foreign actions in Canada is under the purview of my colleague, the Minister of Public Safety," end of quote. In other words, she seeks your advice on the question of expelling Beijing diplomats. Canadians deserve to know, in the face of interference, a vast campaign of interference in 2 federal elections, police stations that are being discovered, it seems like on a almost weekly basis, why has no action been taken to expel the very diplomats involved in these activities?
Madam Chair, perhaps Mr. Cooper missed what I said in my original answer, which is that the RCMP have shut down the so-called police stations, and they will continue to be proactive in that regard.
8 illegal police stations, not a single Beijing diplomat expelled. Why not, Minister?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Cooper, we're eyes wide open about the threats. We've put in place threat reduction measure powers for CSIS. The RCMP is taking decisive action, and we will continue to be proactive.
Okay, so listen, I'm just going to pause the time for a second. I get it, and I'm also just going to be a little bit lenient because I know there's a little bit of theater involved, but let's just try. Your last answer was really good. It was shorter than the question was. Just try to keep it tight, and then you know, Minister Mendicino, how this works. Let's just try to go with the flow. Mr. Cooper.
Minister, what is the holding block? Is it you? Is it the Minister of Foreign Affairs? Or is it that your government is simply soft on Beijing because there have been no arrests, no charges, and no diplomats expelled? Why not?
None of the above, Madam Chair. I think I have now been very clear about the concrete actions that we've taken against the so-called police stations and putting in place additional powers to protect all of our democratic institutions.
And since, Minister, you're not going
to... Point of order, Madam Speaker. First, just in terms of a technical issue, I mean, and a health issue for the interpreters. But second, I feel the witness is being harassed, not allowed to answer the question. What's the point of this interaction if it's not to get a response from the minister that is here?
I don't have... I just feel like the first round's always the toughest one, and then we just have to get through it because it is just what it is. And I don't know how many more times I can say one person speaks at a time. It's difficult for interpreters. If there's advice or guidance as to what I can say or do, let me know. I welcome it. I try really hard to run a functional committee, so I appreciate the point of order. I try to preempt the point of order. So I don't know. But
so on
if
that
there's
point
advice,
of order,
yes, Mr.
On that point of order, you asked for advice. My advice would be to at least allow the minister to start answering the question before the opposition jumps in and interrupts. That would be my advice, is at least let him get a sentence out before deciding that they don't like the answer.
I think that's reasonable. Can we try to continue? And so what happens in this room, like in all rooms, there's a fine person who works really hard to turn our microphones on. So if we can all just keep our hands away from the microphone will turn on for you, and that way we know that there's only one on at a time and only one person is heard at a time. And so let's try to let the mic technician do their job and not go. And if we just keep an eye to each other, we'll see the impatience of wanting the floor back. And I think we can always provide, which is an unwritten rule, the amount of time for the question, comment, and answer, and we kind of go from there. So with that, 3 minutes left for you, Mr. Cooper. I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have asked the Minister 3 times why not a single Beijing diplomat has been expelled. So I'll ask a 4th time. Why not? What is the holdup?
Madam Chair, in fairness, Mr. Cooper also asked about police stations. I was directly responsive to the fact that the RCMP have shut them down, and we will continue to be vigilant in taking whatever actions are necessary to combat foreign interference, including, if necessary, expelling foreign officials.
And have you advised the Minister of Foreign Affairs, since she is taking your advice on that question, to expel Beijing diplomats?
Madam Chair, I work very closely with Minister Joly. I work very closely with all of my colleagues in government, and we will continue to be vigilant when it comes to combating foreign interference using all of the authorities, some of them new, which the Conservatives have opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, no arrests, no charges. The FBI have laid arrests, but not in Canada in respect of the illegal police stations. Since you have failed to expel diplomats, and you, for all intents and purposes, refused to answer that question, will you, at the very least, in the face of interference in not 1 but 2 federal elections and the operation of 8 illegal police stations, at least 8, at the very least, rebuke the Beijing regime?
Madam Chair, and I would strongly encourage Mr. Cooper to listen to what the words that I am saying. The RCMP have taken decisive action to shut down the so-called police stations. We've also earmarked approximately $50 million in Budget 2023 to increase their capacity to combat against foreign interference. And it's quite clear that the Conservatives are going to vote against that provision, which will actually be counter to our national security.
I asked a very specific question of the Minister. The Minister didn't answer my question. That's consistent with the pattern that we've seen in the last several minutes. So I will invite the Minister again, right here, right now, to rebuke the Beijing regime. Will you do that, Minister?
Madam Chair, Canada is among the strongest voices when it comes to rebuking any authoritarian regime, and anyone that stands against human rights, and will continue to do that.
Just
Point of order
now.
Madam Chair. I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Turnbull?
I have to raise the point of order because clearly Mr. Cooper is not abiding by the normal rules of decorum in the committee where you don't talk over the witness while they're trying to answer the question.
I see that. I think the Minister was trying to answer your comment. I know that you don't feel that way, and that's okay. I am going to give Minister Mendicino you 10 seconds, and then we'll pass on to the last 20 seconds to Mr. Cooper. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate the concerns about how it is that we are protecting our institutions, and we will continue to, and also, again, condemning any violation of human rights. Canada has a very proud and strong record on that front.
Well, the Minister couldn't even see fit to rebuke the Beijing regime for election interference and for operating 8 police stations in Canada. This is a government that is very weak on Beijing.
I couldn't disagree more.